Look, this is what I've been wanting to talk about since we watched that show. Actually, since I finished the third book, I've
I'm sure. Yeah.
needed someone to talk to about this.
Yeah.
Dispose of my dread.
I feel like it really is a book series where you need someone to talk to. You feel like you just like uncovered like, I don't know, secret of the universe, and you're like, oh, but
Yeah, old Reddit threads just aren't cutting it for me. All right, so what? If you're watching this, you've probably read the 3-body problem. If not, I don't know. Just go read it. It's good.
Yeah. It's not too long. It's good.
Well, it's a little long, but it's worth it, and it's different from most things that you read.
If you're into science fiction, you're going to like it, I think.
For sure.
If you're interested in like Asimov, that Arthur C. Clarke kind of stuff, I feel like you will definitely like it.
Definitely.
Maybe it won't be your favorite thing. It's not perfect, that's for sure, but...
And if I were to give like a spoiler-free review, I guess, the ideas presented in this were so unique compared to things that I've read before. And I just, it was definitely a page turner for me. So I'm very happy I read it. But I will say it's not, maybe my favorite book just because of the way that it's written. But in terms of just the ideas presented, I think if you like science fiction, you just, find someone hey, both of you guys read it and start a little book club, and I think you'll get a lot out of it.
You know what I'll say is like, it really does not pull any punches. Like, it really goes for it.
I was rereading some parts, and yeah.
As Barack Obama said, it's wildly imaginative. I think that's pretty accurate. Like, when you start, you can't predict what's going to happen. It just goes bananas.
It's incredible. All right, so let's just start off with the concept of the whole series.
Okay.
And we'll retread on some stuff we've talked about with the first book in our 3-body problem Netflix series review, but we'll try to kind of keep the first book out of this one, especially because I think it really picks up in the middle of the second book. But
agreed.
The concept of the story, I knew this part, right, going in, and this was always really cool to me, where you're trying to communicate with somebody, and that somebody tells you, hey, shh, keep it down. They might hear you. That's one of the coolest things.
No, I think the coolest thing for me...
I said one up.
The coolest thing for me is not just that part. It's the, hey, like, be quiet, someone might hear you. And then they're like, oh, good. I want them to hear.
Yeah.
That's the part where it's like, oh.
I love that it took so long to tell the story. This isn't a story that was 10 years on Earth. It was hundreds of years. And he really did explore kind of the nooks and crannies of, what if you did this? What if you did this? It was sort of like an experiment where you had some people break off and do this, and you had a control experiment, and you sort of see what happens.
It was very thorough, and that's both good and bad, I'll say. I think I might have read the third book especially like too fast, like in too short a time. Part of it is that we wanted to talk about it. The other part is I was legitimately interested in going forward, It feels like this book might be better, or the series might be better served by reading it and kind of like taking your time, let the ideas kind of marinate a little bit, as opposed to just like blasting through. But it is interesting. At the end of it, I found it was like a little bit tedious, I'll be honest. But again, that might be because I just crammed it all in like a short space. So I will say that the author, Cixin Liu, does things very thoroughly. He'll explore like every angle. So something crazy will be happening, and then a ship will like go over to investigate. And then he'll be like, on the ship, there are these two guys. One was from this faction. Initially, people on Earth thought that this might be the better way to approach this problem, but these people disagreed. The UN formed a resolution saying that this was outlawed. The ship itself was made of 3 rotating bodies. The bodies themselves were made of 3 different composites of aluminum that could counteract the masses. He thought of this as they were floating toward... It's kind of just like goes on. I'm like, just what are they going to,
Sure.
And those things that he talks about are interesting, but in that moment, I'm like...
You maybe ignore things that you shouldn't because you want to see where the plot takes you.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm like, what insane thing is about to happen? I don't care how the ship works.
So that's the biggest pro of the books in general, is the ideas and the concept.
It's really what science fiction, I don't know if supposed to be is the correct word, but what it can be or what it can strive for. It really explores these out there ideas on the fringes of science and says, hey, what would things be like? What could they be like? What problems would we encounter? How do we deal with these things? What does it mean for humanity?
So unfortunately with this, the biggest con, I'll just talk about it right now, is sort of the characters. When I think of maybe like Lord of the Rings, because everybody's seen it, and you think of Frodo, you can't just like paint one picture of Frodo, right? You'd have to have maybe 2 or 3. You see Frodo in the beginning, Frodo in the end, and those are 2 completely different characters. you know, what they've been through, what he's been through has changed who he is, and he is a different person. In this series, it feels like almost every character, maybe Luoji accepted, every character remains that one person throughout the entire thing. Like, it's a portrait. It's a nice portrait. It's interesting, but the characters themselves don't really change too much.
I would agree with you that that's the case. However, I don't really know if it's such a problem. The characters, I wouldn't say are super strong. It's certainly not about them, really. It's more about the ideas. I didn't really find it to be a problem, though. I thought they were good enough, and I thought they had like a little bit to them. And I would say Luo Ji is probably like the strongest character. You'd agree? I mean, he has...
I agree.
I feel like he has the most development or arc as a character. You also get to see him in different points in his life where he's very different. He goes through a lot.
Yes.
But I never found that to be an issue. The other thing I would say is that it might be, I don't know if, probably not necessary, but it could serve as an advantage because you're going through such a crazy ride in the development of society, technology, what's going on with the aliens and whatnot. It might be nice to have an anchoring point.
Yes.
Not have a character that's also kind of floating around. It's like, this is a person from our age that you understand. This is what they're dealing with, I guess.
And on that, actually, related to that our age thing, so they refer to people, you know, because this series goes hundreds of years in the future, and there's cryopods or whatever, and people wake up, you know, 100 years later. People from our age right now, me and you, are known as like common era people.
Yeah.
It does feel like the author...
I don't know if you want to get into that now or later, but I do have stuff about that for sure. I think I know what you're going to say.
Well, it's just funny, like how the author basically, it's like an older person talking about like a Gen Z or millennial, like
100%.
Kids these days. And it's just so funny that like common era people are like good salt of the earth people, and everybody else is effeminate, just, you know.
He makes numerous references
to agriculture.
No, he makes numerous references to the fact that like common era people from our era that were frozen, hibernated, are
just
stronger, strong-willed, able to deal with psychological problems, whereas all the new people kind of break down. And this is from like a Chinese guy in 2008.
70s, I believe.
It's just very funny that it's just very transparent, and you know, their lives are much easier. I don't know if would it be true? I don't know.
I think he's not wrong.
I have a quote for you, and I think it's a little too specific, but let me read this to you. The femininity / wussification of future generations.
Wow.
Is what he describes. So I have a quote from the book for you. The decade of the 1980s was probably the last time when masculinity as traditionally defined was considered an ideal. After that, society and fashion persisted to display traditionally feminine qualities. She recalled Asian male pop stars of her own time who she had thought looked like pretty girls at first glance.
Obviously this author is right.
It's very funny that it nails down the 1980s. I'm like, bro, that's
like me saying, man, the early 2000s, bro, that was the best.
That's when that's the last time you saw real men. 2008, 10.
Somewhere around
real
there.
Real men.
Yeah.
Which is so funny. And then I have another one for you.
Okay.
I think this was Cheng Xin was kind of she noticed that she had only seen women around, and then she realized that some of them were men.
Yes.
And then she kind of realized that the future is female, as it were, I guess. Everything was feminized. And then she had this thought, the society is overall dedicated to femininity, ... But what does this mean for deterrence?
Ironic that she says that.
It's like a 1950s, like, all the men are turning to women. Who knows who the commies?
1950s.
Well, like, yeah, but like about the commies blowing us up specifically, like the Cold War.
Yes.
Like, how are these guys gonna handle the Russians?
Yes, and then in addition, the author kind of shines through when he really idealizes sort of farm work.
He does.
Where Yun Tianming is, you know, on the Trisolaran spaceship just farming.
Yes.
When the underground city, the Leaf City, sort of gets messed up, everybody goes to the surface, and that's where the real, you know, salt of the earth people are, you know, farming. And then in the future when they have their floating space cities, you know, there's one city where Chengxin goes and visits, and you know, it's more kind of, I mean, basically describes like a 1980s city where the people lead a simpler life, and there's not as many ads and stuff, and you know, everybody remarks that this is how it should be.
And then also at the very, very end, when they're in that little universe, they're
Right, the
just
mini
farming.
universe as well, of course. And so he really, his ideals or his desires, I feel, really do shine through very easily in this book.
I just notice it every time. Every time I just felt like an old guy complaining about the new generation, how they're like pansies and can't handle stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Which is pretty common throughout time. It's just funny though that because he's the author and this book takes place over hundreds of years, it's not a theory, it's like fact, you know?
Oh, yes.
It's not like a golden age like nostalgia thing. It's like no, this is how it is. Everyone's falling apart except for people born in 1980.
Sure, yes.
In a similar vein, and I don't know if you want to talk about it now or this early, the discussion of like female characters.
Yeah. So okay,
Do you
that
wanna
was
talk about it
that was
now?
my big thing about. Let's just get this stuff out of the way.
Okay.
All right. The other thing that he does, which isn't great, is every book starts off with a woman dying, right? So there must be something there. And then his writing of women is just it's not great. And I saw some stuff online where women were complaining about how he writes women, like specifically in the Chinese text. I think it's even worse.
Yeah.
And so one thing, just tangent, the person who translated these books, great job, I think.
Well,
Like,
I have to assume so. I have no idea what the original Chinese is like. But
yes, but this
it
was
does seem
very easy to
good.
read. Very, I don't have.
I think it's very good. It's very easy to read. It gets it across. It doesn't feel. It still feels a little bit. You can still feel that it's like a foreign book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They didn't take the culture out of it.
Mhm.
So I think it's very good. It seems very good.
Yeah, I think it's Ken Liu is the name of the translator.
Yes, it's on the book.
Okay, let's just talk about the worst offense, which is going to be the second book,
Okay.
and just the way that Luoji's like dream girl manifested.
You want to talk about his waifu?
Yeah, man. Okay, so
You want to talk about
Luoji's
Laoji's waifu?
Yeah, so okay, Luoji's in this place, secluded Garden of Eden or whatever, and he says, "Dashi, I want you to find me this woman, pretty, shy, sort of, just timid girl who's like beautiful." And then Shi Qiang kind of finishes a sentence like, "Oh, and let me guess, you want this and this as well, huh?" And Luoji's like, "How did you know? It's like you can read my mind." And then they just find this person, and it quasi works out because they reel it back a little bit because she was basically assigned this mission.
I got the quote for you. So Luoji is describing to Dashi, describing to him what he wants, and then he says, Shi Qiang says, "There's nothing supernatural about it. We're both men." And then Luoji says, "But every man's dream lover is quite different." And he responds, "Dream lovers are basically the same for men of a certain type."
Mm-hmm.
Which
And
is,
Shi Qiang does not put himself in that certain type,
no, he doesn't.
which was hilarious.
But they both come from the same author, which is interesting. It maybe highlights some awareness of that.
Maybe.
But okay, so there's two problems. One, I mean, he has a waifu that's hilarious. He just it's what you would imagine like those are they called otakus in Japan? Like their idealization of like a woman, like delicate, frail, not combative or like aggressive or possessing
like
of
borderline sickly.
or possessing like their own opinions,
Mm-hmm.
just like a delicate flower that you have to keep away from everything, and that you just kind of sit there and admire its beauty. It's delicate, how delicate it is, how elegant it is. That's what he describes, but not just for his Laoji's waifu. That kind of comes up every time.
Mm-hmm.
Idealized women are like kind of talked about. And I don't know, maybe there's like a cultural Chinese thing with it. I have no idea.
I mean, I think definitely there's one cultural part of it.
I'm sure there's a cultural component that I'm not getting. But that's one thing. The other thing is, I think women are responsible for all the major screw-ups in the book.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So the third book. So that was the most blatant, was Luoji stuff. But then Chengxin gets done way dirty.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. So Ye Wenji calls the aliens there.
No. Let's start even before that. Ye Zitai's wife gets up on the stage during the struggle session and basically like outs him. The Red Guard girl, who's like 14 years old, is the one who kills our Ye Zitai.
Yeah.
It just starts from the very beginning.
Ye Wenji calls the aliens there.
Mm-hmm.
Causes the whole problem to happen to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the second book, the guy, Bill Hines, one of the wall facers, has this plan. His wife, betrays him. She's his wall breaker.
Which I thought was so obvious because they were like talking in the garden in secret or something. And I was just thinking, wait, what? There's number one, there's like Sophon's just listening to everything. But number two, why are you communicating all this stuff with another person? This is directly against what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. So she's like, hey, I screwed you over. Haha. I found out your thing. And then Chang Shin screws up constantly. So she, within 30 seconds of being handed the keys to the ICBM for this mutually assured destruction, within 10 seconds of becoming the sword holder.
Let me paint this a little bit more. Okay, so not only does he really say that future generations are wussified, sure, but then it kind of plays out in the plot because they end up electing Chang Shin as their new sword holder.
Yeah.
And so, basically Luoji's been in this like basement the entire time, just like looking, wait, give me a reason. I'll push this button.
Yeah.
And then I would expect someone like Luoji, who understands what's happening and has had years basically in isolation doing this. If there's so many people on this planet, one of them should have the idea, hey, when they trade, their roles, that's the perfect time to strike. And no one ever did. It seemed like there's like 5 people involved in this whole thing. And also with Chang Shin, if she's handed this responsibility, she should at least understand the power does not come from me pressing this button. The power comes from them thinking I'm going to press this button. All I have to do is be the kind of person who would press this button. That's all I have to do. I'm being monitored constantly. It just seemed like kind of the people around them were sort of dumbed down.
The other thing is, once it happens and they're attacking you just press the button, because what other option do you have?
Yeah.
Because they're already going to come destroy and enslave your whole planet, so I don't really understand I know it's like a big thing, but that's your job, and presumably you've thought about it for more than 30 seconds, so it's like...
Right, and you had all these like common era real men who had got together and said, hey, you probably shouldn't be in charge of this thing. So Chang Shin messes up.
So she screws up, but it's funny because it happens immediately, within minutes, immediately. They're like, oh, she doesn't have the gumption to press this button, and we all know it, so we're going for it. And they were right. I mean, that...
Of course.
Okay, so yes, he kind of does her dirty that way. And then... the part that drives me crazy. Yeah, so Wade, another real man, invented faster...
One-arm Wade said, hey, Chang
travel.
Shin, give me your company and your resources, and I will get us faster than light travel, or whatever it was. And she did that, went into hibernation, and she was woken up because he had promised her that he would consult her if there was ever any event that
might endanger humanity
or something. Man, okay, so they're having basically like a face-off with the government, and they're in a position where they can maybe, make things work and win and continue on with their research. And she basically tells them, no, stop.
They have like a light speed.
They have a prototype that works.
Created, like a drive, yeah. And they have antimatter gats that will blow up a whole ship with like one bullet or something crazy, because they've been making that on the side. And then she says, give it all up, throw it all in the trash, surrender everything, we're done. Which also turns out to be a horrific mistake, which dooms the solar system.
Yes, and it's
except for her, because she could escape.
Of course, and it's explicitly stated at the end that, hey, if humanity had maybe a few more years, everything would have worked out fine.
Yes.
And her decision messed everything up.
So this is every major decision that screws over the entire race, all the way back to Eve, I suppose, in this book series is a woman's fault, which is a little bit glaring.
And then it's like Chang Shin, like basically because of other people's niceness, has this faster than light ship that is able to escape the eventual like doom of the entire solar system. And Luoji's just kind of sitting there, and his like some of his last words were like, yeah, you really screwed up. Nah, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
And she just gets to go and live her life. So it's weird to me that the author then ends with this weird sort of... He didn't treat her like a real person, because at the very, very end, when they're in this mini universe and they have to decide to basically step back into the normal universe to allow, I guess, creation to happen again, it's her like kind of goodwill that propels that forward. He sees her as like a very pure person.
Yes. Again, it's that kind of idealized female thing where it's like super delicate, super pure, not aggressive, won't push the button, right? Mm-hmm. You remember at the very end when Guan Yifan, the guy that she's with in the universe, is talking to her. He says, like, hey, it's not your fault. Like, the death of an entire race is not due to, like, a single person. It's not due to one person's actions, so it's not your fault. It's all of our faults because we shouldn't have put your dumbass in charge. It's kind of what the implication is.
Yeah.
So...
And that takes away her agency.
You know, it's the author kind of saying... So the author's, like, trying to, like, let her off softly. So what I think is, it's not necessarily that... It's complicated. It's not necessarily that he doesn't like women and says they screw everything up. It's almost like I feel like what he's saying is that we as humanity should strive towards this.
Yeah, I do think he is idealizing her, what I guess traditionally would be called more feminine traits.
I don't think, from the author's perspective, that these are negative characters. I think that Chang Xin, for example, is kind of like an idealized version of humanity that we should be striving for. It's just unfortunate that in this horrible dark universe that can't exist, but we should still seek to strive for that as humans.
He chose to make that person a woman.
Always.
And that's a choice that he made.
Sure.
And then the women in this just, I mean, AA exists, right? So she is sort of against all of this, which is, she's a really fun
she
character.
Pulls out a gat and starts shooting at the other shuttles.
Yeah, she shoots the launch. Dude, so she's one of my favorite characters.
And she's like, screw them kids. We can't take them with us. And she's like, hey, just press the button and just nuke those people on the launch pad. We got to get out of here. You know?
Right. So the fact that he had her in there is good because she's a good... If she didn't exist, every woman in this entire series almost is... like very one-dimensional.
As I said, I don't think that from his perspective, this is a negative thing. But it is kind of like it's more old school
I'm not sure if
of femininity.
Infantilizing is the word.
Yeah, I think that's probably...
Maybe.
Dude,
well, the way that they treat her in the book specifically,
Luo
the guys
Ji's
treat her in the book,
waifu is, I would say, his ideal is like infantilized, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because he just wants someone who's like pretty delicate, that he has to take care of and protect from everything.
Mm-hmm.
Not like unheard of, but it's very kind of old school. Again, I can see why women would be upset about the portrayal.
So you have characters, you have factions, you have things bigger than characters, and you can have interpersonal conflict, you can have internal conflict. I think one thing that this book doesn't really have much of is like character versus character. For example, even with Blue Space, you have these ships just kind of floating away from Earth, and the captains independently come to the realization that it makes sense for really just one of the ships to survive so that they can have more food, more backup supplies. Blue Space, they suit up and they destroy all the people on the other ship. That conflict, it's people literally killing people, but there is no personal sort of animosity there. Even Zhang Beihai, like when natural selection, he understands, this is what's about to happen. He has no ill will towards the people on the other ship. The conflict is not between this person and this person. It's between sort of the ideas. Like the idea to do it in the first place was the conflict. It was very internal.
When Zhang Beihai goes all Mission Impossible and makes those meteorite bullets and kills those people that are in charge of like...
Right, when he wants to steer technology...
Nothing is personal. It's about the ideas again.
Exactly. So that's one thing in these books that I don't really mind, but it does come across. It is interesting because these ideas are explored from the vantage point of single characters. But then characters end up representing more than just a character, right? You can't have individual decisions. You can't have, hey, this is how everyone in this faction acts, except for this person because he has a different storyline and he acts differently or he's unique. Everybody is the same, including the person that we're following. And there are a lot of factions, right? Even from the first book, you have the Earth Trisolar Organization. But within that, you have the Adventists and the Redemptionists. You have defeatists, you have escapists. In the far future, you sort of have the people who live in the spaceships, you have the military, you have this command, and you have all these hierarchical structures, and the people within those structures who are our characters, they behave sort of as the whole. There's not really much individuality expressed between them, which is, again, fine, but it's just something you notice as you read the books.
People can be avatars for certain ideas, but I think that's kind of necessary.
Agreed.
I fear that if you injected interpersonal conflict and stuff like that, you would end up with three-body Netflix, which sucks.
I do agree.
I mean, you could do it better, but
Of
still.
course, of course. And so Luoji is maybe the one person who I can't really pin down as, oh, he belongs specifically to this group or that group. Maybe Xu Qiang as well. And so that's what, to me, made the characters more interesting. So when we watched the Netflix show, we had both read the first book. I'd read the entire series, but I really wanted you to get through the rest of the series because I think specifically like 60% of the way through the second book, I think when he wakes up from his little cryo sleep is when I feel the books really took a different turn. Like it really amped up the sci-fi-ness.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of, for me, turned into a different series. It went from sort of this mystery tension sci-fi thriller to really like futuristic space opera type stuff.
In the Dark Forest, there's a sharp change. There's a sharp turn where he gets frozen 200 years. It's not 9,000. It's not 50. It's like 200.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's a sharp change. He wakes up and then life is great. The world is very different. And also their technology has advanced way farther than they imagined. And to the extent where Trisolaran invasion is not going to be a problem, they think. So everyone's kind of just chilling. They're like, yeah, our ships are like 15% of the speed of light, like way faster than we thought. The fleet is huge. Our weapons are awesome. No one cares about that fleet stuff anymore. So let's all just hang out.
I loved this so much. This is one thing that, you know, if the author does have any kind of intentions behind writing these books, it's, hey, let's focus a little bit more on our science research.
Yeah.
Because that was so cool where we think we've come so far, but without researching like particle physics, it's sort of like, and then they mention it in the book as well. I don't know exactly what the analogy was that they used, but like 1,000,000 horses aren't going to beat 10 tanks.
Yeah.
And we have no concept at that stage in the book as humans.
You're talking about when they encounter the droplet?
No concept of like what new technology could be
that
like.
That was awesome. I love that part. That was amazing.
Oh, you love that part too. 80% through every single one of these books, something insane happens.
That was completely insane, yeah.
And his descriptions of these things are actually a lot of fun to read. I think in the first book it was when you had Syzygy, when you had all the horses and everybody sort of just gravity kind of disappearing and everybody just floating up. It was a great visual. In the second book, you had this fleet getting destroyed. And in the third book, I mean, oh my God, but he does a good job of describing being there. And he, like you were saying earlier, does not pull punches.
It's cool when a book or a story or something gets you to that point where you get to the tippy top and you just collapse. Like you're feeling like this good. And then all like in 2 seconds, you're like down here, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So when they encounter that droplet, and they're just like in parade formation, and in like 5 seconds it just destroys the entire fleet, and it's completely unstoppable, untraceable. There's nothing they can do except for get out of there. I don't remember who was talking to who, but they were talking about how they invented automatic crossbows like in the Middle Ages. I don't know what time in China. A long time ago when they had crossbows. And he said it's like a facsimile, or like it's similar to a machine gun, but it's nothing like a machine gun, you know? It's the same thing. I think what they said was the droplet was held together by like the strong force only. So, and you remember, was it Ding Yi? When they go to investigate the droplet, and he's just like zooming in and zooming in and zooming in.
It's
He's
just
like
perfectly
smooth. And it's just so upsetting, you know?
And man, like that's where the existential stuff comes from, which you can show this, you can portray this in a TV show, but it's not going to be, hey guys, let's all get the gang together and watch this fun TV show.
Yeah.
If you want to put this emotion into people's heads, which I imagine, you know, there's not much demand for, hey, let's have people watch something that's going to scare them, like actually scare them. You can, but man, these books do a great job of just making you think that this stuff is possible, sort of putting you in the shoes of these people in the future, making you ask these questions, and just sort of really hammering home, hey, you are really insignificant in the grand scheme of the universe.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
That happens even a couple times.
Yeah.
Like you think that you've hit rock bottom as far as how insignificant you are in the universe, and it keeps going farther.
I think I should just talk about it now. My favorite, this is the part of the books that will stick with me forever, is somewhere in the Orion galaxy.
Yeah.
Some dude named Singer is just looking for life forms and just boop, just destroying like suns and planets.
Yeah.
And it was so casual. Like that's what really gets me is how casual it was, because this entire buildup of the entire third book has been, this is how we're going to escape. Like we've seen something propelled into the sun, destroyed a couple times, and now we have a way to escape it. We've built it. We're secure. We're safe. And you reading Singer's part, there comes a point where he says, oh, like you're hoping he doesn't notice that they're going to hide
Behind Jupiter or whatever.
And he notices, and that's like another sinking feeling. We're like, oh no, we're like asked for like the money to employ one of the dual foil weapons, and you know that it's sealed. Like humanity's fate is sealed. And so when our humans encounter this little slip of paper just floating towards them, you understand it's over. Like you maybe are holding out a little bit of hope, but it's just insane how insignificant that made humans appear.
It's like you're two Beatles like fighting over like a branch, and then in that one chapter it just zooms out to like the Milky Way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's what humanity is. So yes, it just reveals like the scale of the universe. This is happening constantly all the time. This is like not even a sideshow. It's just like some bureaucrats 9 to 5 is to like blow up solar systems. Again, very casually, like you said. And then also the crazy thing that got me is that he sees that, oh, like they're trying to hide behind the gas giants. It's not like oh, well, how are we going to get them now? It's like, oh, we'll just have to deploy level 2. Like there's probably like 10 levels of like stuff they could use. He's like, oh, well, now I have to call my boss.
Yeah, get this pre-authorization or something.
And then the boss is like, yeah, just you do it. Whatever. Don't waste my time.
As they make their preparations to go into 2D space.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Okay, so...
Oh, man.
So the droplet stuff was insane. Do you want to talk about Zhang Bahai?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Okay.
do. I love him.
Yeah. Well, he takes decisive action, that's for sure.
That's what you need, decisive action.
He's like a secret defeatist the whole time, right?
One thing I have to bring up is Heinz's imprinting stuff.
Okay.
Did that ever...
Okay,
Was there an ending
let's
to
talk
that?
about these ideas, I guess, that are in the second book while we're here, I guess. So the imprinting, Heinz, one of the wall facers, comes up with that way to manipulate your thought patterns to make you believe. That was cool, where they didn't want to drink water.
Uh-huh.
And because they thought it was poison, even though they knew it wasn't. I was going to ask you the same thing, though. There's kind of like this thread, and I don't remember if it's in the second or third book, where Heinz had been like implanting these, what were supposed to be unshakable faith in victory, but it turns out that he was doing the opposite, putting an unshakable belief that they won't win, so they have to escape. But that never went anywhere.
Well,
seemingly,
nobody ever really knew, like, did these people exist or
they kind of just said, like, well, we don't know if those people are still around. Are they hiding it? Did they die out? But then
that was sort of a strange...
I was kind of waiting for the whole fleet to revolt or something and be like, hey, we're all actually escapists, but it never really happened. And I don't really...
Yes. And it couldn't have been Zhang Beihai because he was there beforehand, right?
The whole time.
Well, it's funny is Zhang Beihai had these attitudes, but his friend who like left the military basically had similar ideas of like defeatism. And it's just funny, both of them actually, you know, and on principle, I guess, felt the same way, but Zhang Beihai's course was so different.
Yes.
That propelled him 200 years into the future with as a fugitive away from the Milky Way or the solar system. Just the decisive action that he takes and just how sure of himself he is, he really propelled everything forward. And even if he wasn't the one to ultimately survive, you know, his actions basically...
He doesn't care. He's like completely, utterly dedicated to humanity's survival.
Right.
With or without, it doesn't matter.
What's funny is my feelings throughout the third book were sort of like sad. I was happy because, oh, humanity survives. And then when it looked like humanity was going to die off in the solar system, I was like sad, but I was like happy that like 2 ships had made it.
Yeah.
And then when it looked like...
The droplet attack? Or
No, after that, when it looked like Cheng Xin was going to die on that planet or something, I was like, well, at least there's human colonies out there somewhere, and I was happy. And then when billions of years went by and she went into the mini universe, I was sad because all the humans were gone. But then when the English language or whatever human language came on the message, I was happy again because some had survived. It's just so funny that my personal emotions hinged on whether or not any humans survived at all.
Yeah.
And if he was even 2, I was like okay with it.
Again, these are interesting philosophical concepts that it traffics in about like the fate of the human race. It makes sense that you would feel that way because without a member of your species around, literally nothing else can understand you then, truly, in the same way, you know?
Yeah.
Even if it's a person that you completely have nothing in common with and don't agree with, you're still both human beings with like kind of a shared, you have no idea what a Trisolaran, how they process things, the universe. So if everyone's gone, that means that you're truly alone.
Well, I think it's more of a genetic feeling, but honestly, on that front, even the Trisolarans, by the end of the series, I had some sort of affinity with them because at least they'd been through like a second of something.
They kind of went through the same thing too.
They did, but I'm just saying, like compared to the rest of the millions, billions, whatever of species in the universe, you know, you feel some kinship with the Trisolarans, as they apparently did with us.
You remember the part where they made all the movies now, like better than we did? That was funny. That's all.
Trisolaran joint.
Yeah. Oh, did you find it interesting or noteworthy that they spent so much time obsessed with like psychological factors? Zhang Bahai was always about like we have to get the morale up, or we have to like freeze people now that have guts and send them to the future.
Did Fallout not do the same exact thing?
Yes, but I found it interesting that in this book that it's so much about technology that a large part of it was fixed on people's psychology.
I think if you really think about it, it does matter a lot.
Sure, it matters.
I think in life, we just can't appreciate it, but because we're living in real time.
But is it a thing that you can really like address in that manner?
Sure. When you look back,
with the political commissar,
sort of. When you look back and see what people have done throughout history, I mean, there are people just like me and you, and they've done insane things, terrible things, or great things, or worked like 20 hours a day, or whatever it is, and they made it through somehow. So the human mind can be very different.
No, yes. I know it's very important, that's for sure.
Sure.
I mean, when you think about like how far can you run, your mind is probably going to give out before you actually can't run anymore. If you just got a bunch of people that said, hey, run as far as you can and don't stop, most people would stop mentally before they physically couldn't run anymore.
They stop way short.
Yeah, way short. Because like when you're running, and it sucks because I hate running, you can always take another step. Like you can keep going
until you collapse. So you should collapse
until your like legs literally stop working. But your brain, your mental state, how mentally tough you are, I guess, will give out probably before then, unless you're like a Olympic athlete or something.
Yes.
So it was important. I just thought it was interesting that focus was paid to those things in a science fiction novel that's so much about crazy technology.
So I haven't read any books by Chinese authors except for maybe a couple, but nothing like this. But this is a Chinese author, and I feel like in his life, there's been a lot of ideological struggles in his country. And so
definitely.
I think the psychology of the people, he's probably seen a huge shift. So he's probably seen a much larger shift in his lifetime than maybe we have. Like, one, we're younger, but two, you know, the United States of America, it's been pretty similar in terms of overall ideology for a long time now. So, you know, I think the time that he grew up in, Xixin Lu, it reinforces sort of the way that he views the future, views the world.
Do you buy the dark forest hypothesis or whatever you call it in this?
Yeah, so okay, look, so Enrico Fermi, one of the 50s, said, "Yo fam, where the aliens at?" And he
said the universe is so huge.
He's got a point.
The universe is so large and has been around for so long that you would expect that life would be very commonplace in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
That given that much time, that many planets, even if like only 0.00001% can inhabit life, there's still like 80 kajillion trillion planets, so there should be a lot. But where is everybody? That's the thing.
Sure. And
so why isn't there anybody there but us, seemingly?
And there's a lot of hypotheses put forward. One is, hey, we are actually the first civilization to kind of make it this far.
Mm-hmm.
One is we're in a simulation, which it's not the craziest thing.
I think it is.
I think the more technology we see every day,
I think it's kind of stupid, to be honest.
Look, 20 years ago, if you told me that this is a simulation, I'd be like, oh, that's kind of scary. But nowadays, I get an Apple Vision Pro.
That's true, but I think when you make that like, well, there's a non-zero chance that the universe is a simulation. So given the eternity of time, more likely than not, we are in a simulation. So I'm in a simulation. That's the kind of thing you get to where you have $80 billion and your head is so far up your that like you're like, I can do anything now because nothing matters. Actually, that's kind of what I feel like the simulation theorem is for.
I don't think it's that crazy, especially when I don't think it's that crazy.
Then,
but okay. The
then
point
there's
is,
functionally no difference between that and it not being a simulation, so it's almost pointless, truthfully.
true. So that's fine with me, right? But then it's a dark forest theory that they're all these civilizations.
Is that a real
but they're all
theory?
keeping quiet.
Is that like the name of it, or is it from this book?
Dark forest theory was the name is actually in here.
Yeah,
but I think it's been postulated.
It's like an actual.
Let me double check. But
I never heard of that before.
Yeah. There's a whole list of these things.
What I'd heard is that we're the first people, as to why there's no aliens everywhere. We're the first. Civilizations tend to wipe themselves out, like with nuclear weapons, before they can develop to that point, and that just is like I don't know, sociology, cosmic sociology rule that tends to happen. That's why there's nobody. And I guess the other one is everyone's hiding.
So extraterrestrial life is rare or non-existent. Yeah, there's like a great filter. I think that's kind of what you were thinking. There's a great filter that just stops societies from progressing to a certain point.
Mm-hmm. Do you buy that though? Like, do you think that that's reasonable, as posited in this book? That it's like the most dangerous thing you can do is to allow the universe to know of your existence, because you get blown up like immediately because you might blow up someone else, and so they can't take that chance. It's like a prisoner's dilemma type thing.
Number one, I think faster than light travel, is it even possible? That kind of changes a lot of this, right? Maybe we're just way too far away, and in the grand scheme of things, human beings have been technologically advanced enough to transmit anything off this planet for what, like 100 years, like a blink of an eye, right? So who knows, right? But kind of a tangent here. That is what would happen, right? If we suddenly discovered that there was like a different type of human living on this planet, like maybe they were just a little bit different, like they had one extra arm coming up or something, there's a reasonable chance we would just kill them all, right?
There's a reasonable chance, but I don't think it's like 100%. I'm not saying it's completely unreasonable, but that's like one of the iron laws or axioms in this book.
But if tomorrow we discovered a civilization.
Yes. Do you think we just blow them up? I don't think so.
Well, we couldn't blow them up.
Even if we could, I don't think we would.
Let's say they're sending something to Earth and we don't know what it is. And it's like there's some giant sphere, right? Like some droplet looking thing. What do we do as a world?
Well, I don't know.
I mean, like, what percent chance are you willing to live with? Like, there's a 99% chance everything's going to be okay. Let's trust them. Let's leave everything. That's cool. Is that good enough for the survival of the entire human race? Like to bet on it?
I don't know. In your theory, can we do anything?
Well, if we could, yeah.
Like, what could we do?
Like, we can either let this ball come to us, or we can destroy everything, including the ball, the other people, everything.
I don't think we would do that, truthfully.
We have had no communication with them. We don't know anything. We know that they're there and they're sending a giant ball towards us. That's all we know.
Well, presumably, if you have the technology to blow up another solar system, I would imagine that you could know something about the ball, truthfully. And if you couldn't, that kind of means that they're probably so far advanced that you can't do anything against them. You know what I mean? It's kind of a weird thing.
I mean, yeah, that parody definitely changes a lot.
But like, do you buy how it's put forth in this, where that's how all civilizations act?
If there's enough that act that way, then, right? What did he say? The cleansing gene and the hiding gene?
In the same way, though, you could argue that we would not have developed different countries and different peoples, but we have. And that we wouldn't be living with each other but we are, you by your logic, we would be.
But we're living this way because we don't have a choice.
We do have a choice. What do you mean?
Well, no, you can't, up until very recently, you can't eradicate an entire.
There was a point
races.
in time where the United States had nuclear weapons and a deadly enemy, and they didn't have nuclear weapons. We didn't blow them up immediately.
But we came really close, and that's other human beings.
Yeah.
And that's with parody, right?
Did they think of Reds as human beings in 1950?
I guess it just comes down to how much of a risk are you willing to take. If they're so much advanced than us, then it doesn't really matter. If they're so much less advanced than us, then yeah, sure, we'll take a chance and see what they're like. But if they're anywhere close.
Can you imagine if we had that capability as a society? Mm-hmm. Do you think we'd actually do that? Like with no not they're sending us a ball. We just know that they exist. We're going to blow them up with nothing else. We're going to destroy their solar system.
How about, I doubt it. Are there any people on this world who would do that?
Well, yeah, sure. But that's the other thing, too, is that I think you have to kind of take into account that it's a whole society acting. To shoot a giant rock at someone else's solar system and blow it up. One person's not in charge of that. It's like a ton of people.
Yeah.
And governments and bureaucracy. I don't think we'd get our stuff together enough to make that decision truthfully.
Maybe not, man.
Like unprompted with nothing else, you know?
There's a lot of discussions here, like about we eat animals and how do we view them. And species go extinct on this planet all the time. We don't really care because they're not us. Like most people don't really.
True, but
and
I think
for our own safety, the things that we've been willing to do as a society.
But those things mostly, those are kind of passive, and
for most people,
those are mostly passive. You don't see the forest being deforested, and if you did, you might feel different.
But same thing here. You're not going to see the star blow up.
But you have to, as a whole society, say we're going to blow this up.
As a whole society, we basically
you have to take conscious action. We're going to send a missile.
If you have one person at the top who says, "Hey guys, this is what we should probably do." I mean, it takes a 51% majority, and then maybe it's done. Okay. How about this? By the time you get
do you really think that's the case? I don't think so.
By the time you get to that point, right, you probably will have more information about the world, about the universe. And if you look around and you see that that's what is going on.
Do you think it's so strong that it's the sociological underpinning of the universe as it is in this? That is like the underlying law of everything.
I know. But in this book, basically you would have like your choices are, hey, we can create a black hole and limit ourselves to the confines of our own solar system and never go beyond it. We can destroy everything else, or we can hide. If those are the only choices that people are given.
Do you buy into this hypothesis that those are the only choices? I don't. Number one, like, cooperation is very beneficial. It's like the wolves that became dogs, you know?
I think on a slow enough timeline, these things are true. If you meet someone and you're not immediately able to like kill them or something, right? Like you meet them, you develop some kind of like friendship, and then you know this person, you trust them. That's one thing.
You could imagine if Earth and Trisolaris weren't adversarial, they could actually be stronger.
I agree with that.
So the ones that cooperate would actually dominate, in theory.
I do agree with that, but I think it depends on the time frame, right? So if two people meet before they become like these gods or something, right? Let's say like two people become very powerful, politically, however it is, and they're just kind of like together, they're friends, whatever, right? By the time they get to that top part, they trust each other, it's there. But if you have this person who's like an emperor, and he meets this upstart who might one day become emperor, same person, but they meet at very different times or points, that's a threat.
Possibly.
Right? And the easiest thing to do is take them out. However that is, you take them out. That's kind of how I see it is. And then the thing is, you have the ability to do it immediately. You didn't have the ability when you're both just like regular old people. But when you're in this situation, it's different. So if you're a civilization and you're already super hyper advanced, and you look over and you see another civilization that isn't super advanced, that isn't going to help you out in any way, then what benefit do you have to letting them live?
It might help you out, though.
It might help you out, or they might see you as a threat and then spend the rest of their entire civilization trying to wipe you out.
That's the hypothesis, I guess. But
sure.
Because the way it's portrayed in the book is that all civilizations think this way.
All the civilizations that survive think that way.
Yeah, maybe.
That's what's so horrifying about the book.
It's like a prisoner's dilemma kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I guess the thing that I have with it is like you're talking about civilizations. That's not one concrete vision or actor.
If I'm an emperor, how about this? If I'm an emperor and I look down and it looks like this ant colony is gonna, mess up my crop next year, and I have the opportunity to eradicate all of the ants, I can maybe just kill all the ants.
Certainly, but my point is that
the ants maybe one day are gonna help me.
The civilization does not act with like one mind as an emperor, as a person.
Our civilization might not. But wait, if we ever got to the point where we could destroy an entire civilization and we looked around and saw this was what was happening, and we said, hey guys, it looks like the rest of the universe acts in this way, what are we gonna do?
See, that's what I'm saying. I'm not talking about the book necessarily. I'm not assuming that the rest of the universe acts this way.
Okay.
Because I don't know if that's true. I don't think that's true.
No, I don't think we would necessarily.
If you lived in this book, obviously there's no choice.
Okay, I don't think we.
I'm saying
currently as a society, if we like found intelligent life, okay, number one, we would be so far below them if they were actually intelligent, probably. And number two, we're not in a position to issue threats to anyone.
No.
But if we found like a fungus or something on Mars, yeah, we would treat them kindly.
Yes.
Okay, so that's easy. Like, that's the other thing is you don't know, like, they're not going to be people who look like us and talk like us, right? Like,
no.
Probably not. That would be a huge coincidence in this world of coincidences. So if we met some kind of Vulcan civilization, yeah, sure. We'll try to make things work. I think we'll try. And there's a 50% chance they'll just wipe us out. Sure. Maybe they'll look like beetles and see how we treat beetles, and they'll say, "Oh, boop."
Maybe. I don't know. The when you're that advanced, do you really fear?
What does that advance mean? It's all relative.
Yeah, but like
You can always be more advanced.
well, if you're blowing up something that like has no idea that you even exist, it's like
Sure.
Anyway, let's
move
we don't
on. So
have enough time. To
yeah.
talk about
So man, we could talk about that forever. I guess other cool things. I loved it when the people on is it Blue Space? They discovered sort of the portals or
the fourth dimension.
Yeah, the way to get into the fourth dimension.
The description of the fourth dimension was
beautiful.
awesome.
That was
the explanation
awesome.
of the fourth dimension was awesome. You could see like the cross section of everything at all times, but like even the cross section of like a solid object, you could see all the slices, infinity slices,
and how when they went back into 3D, it just didn't feel the same, and it was like sort of soul crushing.
And like how you have to be careful because you might accidentally poke your internal organs because you can.
And then just the way that the artificial intelligence that was governing that, I guess, Taurus, the inhabitation,
the tomb.
Yeah, the tomb. That was very cool. It was describing how the fourth dimension was kind of whittling away because of these incessant attacks by these aliens.
Yeah.
And that's why Singer civilization was going to go from 3D to 2D space.
Oh man.
And they were going to make that jump. It's beautiful. And then I loved the opening of the third book.
Oh, the
where
Constantinople stuff?
Yeah, Helena, and
that was interesting.
That was very interesting because I had no idea what exactly was happening. And by the end of the book, it was so cool.
That was cool. Yeah, that was cool.
And you go back and you look at it and it just puts a whole new spin on things. So cool. Again, I don't know if the scientific stuff in here, right? I think
how accurate it is.
I don't think it's very accurate. Maybe, but it's in the realm of like thought or something. And it just
the conception of like multiple dimensions is like almost inconceivable, truthfully.
Yes. And so day to day, I make coffee. I go for a walk and I take a shower. That's cool. And I have a TV, which even that, the way that works is beyond anything that I know. But it's cool to see a book in which these things are shown as so matter of fact, because it forces you to acknowledge how much technology can impact life and civilization in ways that you really don't even think of. And again, I think the author's intention is partly to say, hey, we need to focus more on science, and I agree. But it's just nice to have a book that just kind of like, slaps you in the face like, hey, wake up. This is what's possible. This is what we need to do, and this is why we need to do it.
Yeah.
Again, the realism, all that stuff, I don't know, but that's kind of what you come away with.
The fairy tale stuff.
I was so wrong. I thought I knew what they were saying to do, and I was completely off. I thought it was going to say, hey, go and get those droplets, the ones that they kind of destroyed.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Get those, use those to collect some sort of thing, and then you can use that to sort of escape or hide yourself.
I like how when they first talk about the fairy tales, they brought like literary analysts into the room, and the first thing they say is, hey, like, we're not going to be able to figure out what he's talking about. This is too complicated. And then I also I wrote this down too. When they're talking to those literary analysts, what he says is something else that's not directly relevant here. As a writer, I want to express my respect for the author. As fairy tales, these are very good. Which is funny because the author is like commenting on himself.
Yes.
He's saying to him, hey, these are really good. It's funny.
Yeah, it was, I wanted it to end not differently, but I was hoping that there was like a way across. I like the fairy tales. They were tedious, like you're saying. It took a little while to get through, but I knew that the payoff was going to be all right, so it was fine. But the ending, the fact that they got turned into 2D-ness and just became like one of those pixels figures.
That was
brutal.
Not what I was expecting. I knew something horrible was going to happen, but I didn't think that the solar system was actually going to die. Like at the beginning of the book, I'm like, they're going to get out of this somehow, but no, they didn't.
And just even like the museum that they made is completely meaningless.
Yes,
it's like just shouting into an empty void.
Oh man.
And like nothing matters if you don't exist. Like that's one thing I'll say. And it seemed a little bit contrived when Xianming and Cheng Xin couldn't get together because there's happened to be this sort of slowing of space-time.
Those death strands or whatever that expanded.
Yeah. It seemed contrived. Like the two star-crossed lovers just can never meet.
Yes. I think it was just supposed to be an exploration of what happens when the speed of light is lowered or different.
And he wanted to get to the end of the universe somehow.
Yeah. They just wanted to explore that concept. Like, even though you're not going as fast, because you are now going as fast as the speed of light, it causes time problems, You know what I'll
time.
say? Maybe you can cut this out, but that planet that they ended, her planet, Cheng Shin's planet that he gave her, whatever, and they landed on it. It gave me like a Scavenger's Reign flashbacks, PTSD flashbacks.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, but he was talking about how the plants, like, they move around and they go.
That was horrifying.
And then there's like little balloon animals floating. I'm like, this is cool, but also it's making me think of Scavenger's Reign.
Oh, it looked good.
You know, I think it ended fine.
Right. It's hard to end it in a satisfying way, but I was very happy. I mean, they explored everything literally to the end of the universe.
I mean, it's really kind of a bleak outlook. Really what it is like no one can talk to anyone in the universe because we all just want to kill each other. And the ultimate fate of the universe is to be ruined by the people in it. That's really what it is. That's what happens. It's kind of a bleak outlook. And maybe it's true. I don't know. But that it is what it is, I guess. It's like we're all going to be compressed from 4 to 3, then 3 to 2, and then, you know.
But and on a positive note that the universe will start again.
So we can screw it up all over again.
But it was really fun to explore sort of my own feelings throughout reading the book, where again, I was saying like, oh, humans will survive? Great. Humans won't survive? I'm sad. Humans will survive? Great. And like more desperate situations where like, oh, there's some human colonies out there somewhere? Great. You know, oh, there's some humans somewhere at the end of time. Okay.
Yeah.
It's so weird to.
It is like
to be forced to think of these things and then to understand that, oh, I do have a reaction to it, and to see what that reaction is, because you don't really know until you really think of this stuff.
It really does make you appreciate how tiny and insignificant you are, even the human race is, in both like a physical sense and a time sense. Like they skipped like 18 billion years, and it's like, well, I hope who cares, you know, like what?
That's kind of what I ended up at too. I was like, well, I guess who cares about all that stuff that happened before? Like, we're going to get to this point anyways, one way or another.
They were saying that like AA and
Tianming.
Oh yeah, that they could have like had a whole civilization develop and crumble, and
yeah, at that point, what does any of it matter? And
it's kind of nuts.
It's good to have to think about it.
I mean, time is like, we will get to that point. Like, it will be 18 billion years from now. Eventually, it's gonna happen. I mean, you know, so it kind of makes you feel like, well, does anything matter?
Sure.
You only get like not a micro second on the scale of things.
Yeah.
But then it's like, why does it have to? What would make it matter? I guess you live forever. I don't know.
Yeah.
The civilization
humans survive,
but like to
our
eternity,
kids survive.
To it, but even no matter what you say, it's always in the scale of like a billion years. It just,
yeah,
you know. One thing, did you notice that the Second Amendment is alive and well in like 500 years from now? That was
smoking.
That was crazy smoking. But they said specifically like, oh, most people have like laser handguns, and then like, you know, she had like a laser rifle on that ship. It was like, most people have laser weapons, and they can combine them together like a super laser pointer to like heat up.
Some Ghostbusters logic.
Remember they like got mad at the people in space,
and they started pointing at the
and they just like pointed all their like space guns at it, and they kind of like heated it up.
Wild.
Kind of wild. Oh, another random thing I wanted to talk about. The hibernation was an interesting concept. It was a way, I think, to keep the same characters throughout this incredibly crazy long story.
But it also was very sort of, hey, this is just a common thing you can do if you want.
You know what I didn't buy is that they allow you to keep the interest in your bank account over that time.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, why would everyone would just hibernate for forever until they're rich?
Yeah.
And they specifically said like, oh yeah, like
we took away the ravine, the really bad stuff, so you benefit.
The Great Ravine happened and society almost collapsed. We took that out of there to be fair to you. I'm like,
yeah, no.
But they did talk about how at the beginning of this technology, before it was widespread, that it's the first time that like death is unequal, like the inequality between rich people.
That's happening.
Like,
I mean, that's going to happen sooner than we think, unfortunately.
Yeah, they can skip ahead to the future where things will obviously be better. Maybe they can let the interest accrue on their bank accounts. Dude, if that happened, you would have people when it first came out that would like mortgage their future earnings to like a company. Like Amazon would freeze you, but you'd have to give them like all of the interest that you would earn over like 200 years plus more in your account or something. So when you woke up, you'd be like,
yeah, just the economics of that would have to be really.
It gets.
But yeah, they would have to figure something out. There's no way you could just have a bunch of zillionaires wake up one day and hey, I want the moon now. I want to buy it. Not if I buy it first, and like freeze yourself.
Yeah, I don't know.
I like the description of the city, the flowers or the tree cities. That was very nice. I really do love the way that he explored the future. They become so advanced, but they're still so woefully ill-equipped to deal with the Trisolarans, who themselves are barely advanced compared to the rest of the universe. and
Yeah.
just how finicky or how susceptible, I guess, the human mind is to, I don't know, like self-deceit. Because you read the book and you know, hey, like I knew the entire time, like, hey, that droplet, like, that's not going to be a nice thing.
Yeah.
Like, you know what they've done in the past, and why don't you just remember that and learn from it? But it's like without the Trisolarans saying really anything at all, humanity has gone through these waves of like, oh, they're going to attack us, and oh no, we'll worship them. Oh, we're going to live together happily. Like, it's very illogical. But you see it and you think, oh, that a huge segment of humanity or people would do that. Like, this is probably what would happen. Like, it's a very peaceful era with great technology, and you think everything's going to be okay. And then, you know, a second just kind of disappears. When you read the book zoomed out, it seems very obvious, but then you can put yourself in that position and think,
definitely.
yeah, definitely, this makes sense. That's how people would act.
I have a few other things. The Staircase Project, how is that supposed to help them? They never said how that was. So they send a brain there, but how does that help us?
I think
It just helps them, right?
Well, no, I think like we've been talking about, if we just see a bunch of like colony of like killer ants and it's like, oh my gosh, this is horrifying. That's horrifying. But maybe if one of those like giant ants came to us as like a baby or something and it was very non-threatening, we just studied them.
Was that the intent of the project?
I think so. As a society, maybe we would like soften our stance towards them just in general.
Just wasn't very explicit, I guess. I didn't understand like going through all this effort to just throw a person at them. Why? They can't tell us anything.
No, but
it ended up helping, right? But like, you know, that
think,
couldn't be foreseen.
But I think, you know, like we're saying, if you have two civilizations, like, are they destined to just destroy each other? Well, if you can't communicate or if you can't have like a face-to-face, like this is the way to just...
Suppose. They were in communication though.
They were, but it was different. And if you could like have like an actual face-to-face or be like that, where you're in a position where, hey, I can't hurt you at all. I'm just one person.
Wasn't it weird how they were friends with Sofon at the end?
And that's what I mean with me too. I felt like some sort of kinship with the Trisolarans because they seemed to like, you know, we had like something of a partnership.
I recall Sofon being like, hey, you have to live in Australia and eat each other now.
Yeah, hey, there's food all over.
That was then. This is
now. Things change, people change. But, you know, you have to put aside so much of your immediate short-term sort of logic and thinking and think more long-term. And again, this book forces you to do it. I wish, you know, if they ever end up making a show about this series, I think they could, you know, really amp up sort of the more character versus character
They are making a
tension.
show.
What?
Oh.
I could see how, at least in the first couple of books, you could make a decent show. But then afterwards, it's kind of hard to really... What I would want is something to really hammer home some of these questions that we have, like the futility, you know, what's the purpose? Just to hammer these things home. I think Contact, the movie based on Carl Sagan's book, was pretty good at making you think a little bit bigger.
Like we as a human race kind of have this want to contact aliens and be friends with them. I feel like that's our innate desire.
Yeah, we don't have that hiding gene.
We don't want to kill them.
And we also don't have the cleansing gene.
We don't want to find them and kill them. I feel like we want to... It's kind of weird. If there was like one other civilization out there, we'd be happy. If there was like 10,000, maybe we'd be a little upset. I don't know.
Yeah, if there's 10,000, if there's one, we break out the apple pie. If there's 10,000, we break out the AKs.
Yeah. I feel like if there's like one other civilization, like if you found the Trisolarans for real, like right there, you'd be like, oh, like we're not alone in this horrible empty universe. We're not alone anymore. But if it was like crowded, it'd be like, oh, like this is not good actually.
Yeah, there's only so much. And look, you see, like it's so you could just look now on this planet what we do with the limited resources we have.
I forgot the one thing. Maybe it's strangely parts of it were maybe naive, and some parts of it were not. As far as how he deals with large groups of people, like the mental seal, it changes your mind and what you believe. Remember, the United Nations was instant like we had to outlaw this. This is immoral. This is wrong. We can't do this. I'm like, that wouldn't happen. Amazon would be zapping everyone's brain like the next day. Like, you like working overtime, unpaid overtime.
No, people would be doing it themselves to make their lives more tolerable. It'd be severance.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be like the United Nations immediately saying like, this technology is evil. It can't be used. We as a people cannot, this is unconscionable. That
I think, again, the author kind of shines through a little bit here where, look, man, we live in the great state of America, and it's going to be 15 years before there's any regulations passed about anything once it starts up.
So on the one hand, maybe it's a little bit naive in that sense, but on the other hand, it does a very good job of showing how Luoji, he goes, and lots of characters do, go constantly from like being praised as like a messiah to being like demonized
Chang-Chi goes through that.
but like society as a whole, like they completely vacillate. Like one day you're the hero, one day you're the villain.
And they completely forget about what happened.
They completely ignore what happened.
They downplay your accomplishments. Like, and that seems so realistic.
Yeah, it does, yes.
Completely realistic.
The way that they're treated by like humanity at large, constantly just
It's depressing.
flip-flopping.
It's depressing because people think about this a lot. Like you want something bigger to kind of unite humanity. But I don't know. It's just,
Do you think that we could get our together? Do you think that we could?
you have to tell me the specifics.
Like if this happened for real?
Oh my God. Okay. So number one, I just got to mention this real quick. Homeboy Hines goes and visits the leader of Al Qaeda.
Oh my God! How did I forget that freaking Osama bin Laden is a character in this book?
Dude.
How did I forget
And this
that?
like just shows me like how differently this author, like I can't imagine writing that from this country, but
In
this author
2008?
can. Yeah, that's wild. And he's like going and seeing like kamikaze pilots. Like how can we
Yeah.
like instill this belief into other people?
I remember reading that and I was like, is this Osama bin Laden?
Yeah.
And then it became very explicit and I was like, oh my God.
It's a book that makes it to where the way that we think about our life, living here, it's not taken as like the norm.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. All right, but you'd have to give me the specifics on what.
I mean, like, if this literally happened, we learned that aliens were coming to destroy us and we had to, like, all get together and try to stop them or advance our technology. Do you think we could actually do it? They go through a lot of trials and tribulations in the book, but I'm like, part of me is thinking, like, we wouldn't.
I think there's two outcomes. Outcome number one is we get it together. There have to be some concessions somewhere. Like
I feel like it's currently...
there would be like maybe 100 year, like 50 years of unrest where really, really, really rich individuals have to give up power, like some of it to the government or to the people. And that would be an issue. And so either we come out of that where we have a bit more of like a unified idea on how we tackle the future, or we just fall to pieces and, in 500 years, we barely make it back to like the industrial age.
The way it feels now is that, like, you would immediately have a bunch of people saying, like, oh, that's not going to happen.
Or it's fake. Those were made up.
Those are
like,
fake.
Oh, where are
Or
the aliens?
they're not going to be here for, like, actually 3,000 years, so who cares? And then, like, every rich person would try to build a spaceship, and then we would just...
And I agree that might be how it goes for like 10, 20 years. But, people who actually have power want to stay that way. And they would probably see it more as an opportunity. And at the end of the day, I think most people...
It's almost like climate change, you know?
It is. But at the end of the day, most people can be persuaded or shown to do basically anything. It just takes time. And so I think probably, like it might be hard to envision it working out now. But I think, you go forward 30, 40 years and it would be... Hey, everybody knows that this is a real thing that's happening, and we're,
If you
almost
asked me
working
10
towards
years
it.
ago, I would have said yes, for sure. The last decade has done a lot to erode my faith in my own species.
Right, but in 10 years, it can change that much. 10 years can change it the other way.
It could.
So I don't know if the research can be done fast enough, but I think,
Do you think
could
we even
pull together.
try, though? That's the thing.
Dude, that's the cool thing is I feel like we would definitely try, but I feel like if you put a challenge in front of someone, like give them some kind of like motivation, it really does a lot.
Yeah.
And so as a society, I think even the people, the richest people at the very top, I think they would look at something like this as something of a challenge. It would be an opportunity to, I think you'd be surprised at how many people would be willing to sacrifice a little bit.
But if it
for, like,
happens in
personal
400
gain.
years and you're thinking, I'm going to be dead way before, I don't care at all. Not me, but that's how a lot of people
when I say like
feel.
the most powerful people, right? People who are in charge of like AI companies or people in charge of, space, all this stuff. When you hear them talk, it's very idealistic talk. Like I think they believe, like obviously they're business people, they want to make money, sure. But they believe what they're saying. Like they believe what they're doing is like changing the world or this or that. I think
Yeah, maybe you're right.
I think you give them a challenge like this, they understand that they have the ability to be at the forefront of like the most important human stuff ever.
Yeah, maybe.
And that would change a
maybe you're
lot.
right.
So again, I think it's selfish reasons why it would work out, but I do think we'd give it a good try.
Give the old college try.
Yeah. Anyways, good book series, lots of questions asked. I think everybody should, if you're interested in sci-fi, you should read it. And more than any other book, Foundation, all of this, those books take place in the distant future. This one takes us there, and it kind of makes you consider, I guess, your own path, our path along this.
It is interesting.
voyage.
It does, yeah. It shows you you end up in a crazy place, but it shows you how you get there.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the science is not correct. I'm sure it's not, but
the questions are still valid.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? Who's your favorite character?
Oh, Logi.
Logi. Yeah, I have
That's easy, right?
Yeah, Shi Chang, Sangbihai, AA, Logi. Yeah.
He does what you need to do.
Yeah. What's your favorite book?
That's really hard to answer.
Yeah.
Probably the second one.
Probably. It's probably the best book.
It's definitely not the first one.
Definitely not the first.
Because the first one's not bad, but compared to the other two, like
it's
the
just
crazy ideas that are in there, it doesn't have those.
Yeah. And the third book, the ideas are the best, but then the writing, the way it's written, you're not really as involved, I feel.
It was interesting. The first book had that like cultural commentary about like the history of China and stuff like this.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of all just falls away. I mean, it doesn't become important, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought that was going to be like in there, like a thread of it or something. But because it seemed like such an important theme in the first book, but it really does not.
Yeah, let's read Rendezvous with Rama next then, you said?
Yeah.
Well, for the two people who stuck around, thank you.
That's a wrap.